You thought skipping a few meals was just about discipline. You thought fasting was a physical thing, something you do for God. But what if I told you something starts moving the moment you begin, and not just in you, in the realm around you? What if I told you fasting is one of the most dangerous things you can do, not because of what it takes from you, but because of what it activates? Most people fast and never realize what they've walked into. They sense resistance, they feel chaos, they blame circumstance, but something deeper is happening, something invisible, something ancient. You've been triggering war zones without even knowing it. And now, heaven's watching, hell's watching, and your next move matters more than you think. What if the real danger isn't what fasting brings out, but what happens when you ignore it? The invisible veil that tears when you fast. There is a veil, unseen, unspoken, yet profoundly real. It stretches between what we touch and what we sense. Most people walk through life never noticing it, but when you fast, something shifts. That veil begins to tear, quietly, invisibly. You don't just feel different, you begin to perceive differently. Fasting isn't simply about skipping meals. It's a spiritual ignition, a recalibration of your soul's frequency. Suddenly, what was once background noise becomes a divine signal. A man once told me that on day 5 of his fast, he couldn't stop weeping. Not from pain, from clarity. He described it as if someone had cleaned the windows of his soul. He said, "I could feel God breathing near me." That's what happens when the noise of the flesh is turned down. The voice of the Spirit gets turned up. This isn't mysticism. It's Christianity at its core, the kind that transforms, the kind where prayer feels like being in the same room with Jesus. But here's the question. Why does this spiritual clarity provoke so much resistance? Why does it unsettle the darkness? Because fasting strips away illusions. And once you see the truth, the spiritual reality behind your circumstances, the enemy loses his grip. He thrives in confusion, in distraction. But when your spiritual eyes open, you start to walk with authority. The kind of authority that silences lies and brings the word of God to life. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Matthew 5:8. Think of Moses. 40 days on the mountain, no food, no distractions, just presence. And what happened? Divine revelation, laws that shaped history. That moment wasn't born out of comfort. It came from consecration. In the same way, your fast, whether it's 1 day or 21, is not small. It's a key, a divine key that unlocks vision, direction, even supernatural provision. It aligns you with your calling, your career decisions, even how you handle money. Yes, even that, because God cares about your full life, including your financial freedom, your mental health, and your personal growth. So I'll ask you, have you ever fasted and felt something shift? Did you sense a presence, a moment of clarity you couldn't explain? Drop your experience in the comments below. You never know. Your story could help tear the veil for someone else. The spirits that stir in silence. When you begin to fast, truly fast with intention, you disturb a realm you cannot see, but that has always seen you. The moment you say no to the flesh, something ancient begins to tremble. It's not metaphorical, it's energetic. It's spiritual law. Darkness loses legal ground when your spirit takes the lead. Fasting doesn't just make you feel lighter, it makes the enemy weaker. You're no longer running on human willpower. You've aligned with divine power, and that changes everything. Let's be clear, you're not fighting flesh and blood. You're disrupting structures. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers. Ephesians 6:12. When you fast, those principalities get nervous. They start to shift, they hide, they twist. Why? because they've been feeding off your distractions, your addictions, your disconnection from purpose. But now, you're unplugging the power source. You're breaking agreement, and when the legal ground breaks, the influence breaks. I once spoke with a woman who said, "I fasted for clarity, but on day 3 my dreams became violent. I almost quit." I told her, "Of course they did. That's not a failure. That's the enemy panicking. You see, fasting is a confrontation, a silent one. You don't always see it, but it's happening. And often, the greatest resistance comes right before the greatest revelation. That's why we don't quit. We keep pressing, because what the enemy fears most is who you become when you endure. And what is it that they fear you'll discover? That you were never powerless, that your authority didn't need permission, that inside of you, right now, with the Spirit of God, is enough power to change your life, your business, your finances, your health, your destiny. Fasting exposes that truth. It's like turning on a light in a dark room. Everything hiding suddenly gets revealed. And in that clarity, you don't just get direction, you get vision. Have you ever noticed strange resistance when you begin to fast? Dreams, disruptions, unexplained stress. What if it's not random, but strategic? What if it's a sign that you're stepping into something sacred? Leave a comment and let's talk about it, because here's the truth. When spirits begin to stir, that means heaven is listening and hell is worried. The invisible chains that begin to break. Every time you fast, you're not just skipping meals, you're striking a blow at something ancient. Invisible chains, ancestral patterns, emotional prisons that have wrapped around your identity like vines around a forgotten building. These chains aren't random, they were forged in silence through trauma, choices, bloodlines, beliefs. But now, you're breaking agreements that were never yours to carry. Every day you deny the flesh, you're cutting another link. And the sound of chains breaking, that's the sound of freedom being reclaimed. Think about this. Jesus said, "This kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting." Matthew 17:21. Not all bondage is broken by prayer alone. Some strongholds, the deep ones, respond only when fasting enters the equation. Why? Because fasting is sacrifice. It's authority. It tells the unseen world, I am no longer owned by appetite. I choose alignment. And that alignment with the Spirit begins to unravel what has bound you in cycles. Fear, poverty, addiction, shame, comparison. It all starts to fall. I knew a man who fasted for 7 days not to lose weight, but to break a temper that had destroyed his relationships. On day 4, he said it felt like something crawled out of his chest. He didn't scream, he didn't flail, he wept. Because what broke wasn't just anger, it was the lie underneath it, that he'd never be enough. Fasting is truth surgery, and when the lie is exposed, healing begins. Financial bondage, mental blocks, emotional wounds, nothing can stand against truth empowered by discipline. Now here's the real question. Who put those chains on you in the first place? Was it a voice from childhood, a pattern passed down from your family? Was it a choice you made and never forgave yourself for? Fasting doesn't just free your present, it reclaims your past. It tells your legacy. It stops here. And in that space, you don't just find breakthrough, you find clarity. You begin to understand why you were stuck, and more importantly, why you don't have to be anymore. So I'll ask you, what's the chain you've carried too long? Drop it in the comments. You don't have to write the full story, just the word. Fear, debt, lust, control. Name it. Because when we expose the chain, we begin the process of breaking it. And once it breaks, everything changes. Your mindset, your income, your spiritual authority, your relationships, your career, your productivity. That's what fasting does. It liberates. the spiritual silence that speaks louder than 1,000 words. There's a moment in fasting where everything goes quiet, not outside, inside. You open your Bible and there's no lightning. You pray, and heaven feels distant. But this is not abandonment. It's a shift, a recalibration. Because in that stillness, God is not absent. He's whispering, and silence is often how he speaks the loudest. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10. This is not emptiness. This is intimacy. This is the moment your soul stops performing and starts listening. You see, fasting is not just about what you let go of, it's about what you begin to hear. And in the quiet, your inner world gets exposed. You start to recognize what was God and what was ego. What was peace and what was pressure? It's a holy reckoning, and yes, it can feel uncomfortable because silence confronts. It forces you to face the parts of yourself that noise kept hidden. And when you face them, healing begins. Real healing. Deep, sustainable transformation. Now be warned, not every voice in silence is divine. The enemy speaks too, subtle, twisting. This isn't working. You're wasting your time. You'll never change. But that's when discernment is forged. That's when your spirit sharpens. The silence becomes your training ground, and the Word of God, alive, rich with promise, becomes your anchor. Fasting doesn't just expose external forces, it reveals internal fractures, and in doing so, it invites reconstruction, mental clarity, emotional alignment, financial vision, divine strategy. Picture Elijah alone in the cave, desperate for a word from the Lord. There was wind, there was fire, but God wasn't in the chaos. He was in the whisper. 1 Kings 19:11-12. That's what fasting teaches you, to recognize the whisper. Because when you can hear God in silence, you'll never be manipulated by noise again. You'll lead differently, speak differently, spend differently. You'll create from stillness. And that, my friend, is where supernatural productivity and spiritual wealth begin to flow. So let me ask you, have you ever experienced this silence while fasting? Did it confuse you or center you? Share your thoughts below. Because someone needs to know. That silence isn't rejection, it's refinement. And what comes out of it isn't just insight, it's power. Power to build, to shift, to lead with clarity, and to live in alignment with your calling. The angels that begin to move when the body grows weak. There's a strange paradox in the spirit. When your body grows weak, your spirit grows strong, and in that spiritual strength, something happens that most people miss. Angels begin to move. Not metaphorically, literally, heaven dispatches help. And it's not random, it's responsive. Fasting draws angelic attention because it signals surrender. And surrender is power. Not passivity, not weakness, power. Are not all angels ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation? Hebrews 1:14. You're not fasting alone. Let's go back to Jesus in the wilderness. 40 days, no food, no comfort. And when it was over, angels came and ministered to him. Matthew 4:11. That wasn't poetic language, that was real assistance. Because the weight of spiritual war drains the natural body, but heaven never leaves you unsupported. When you fast, you don't just attract attention, you attract reinforcement. Angels step in with provision, protection, wisdom, strength. Doors open, attacks break, coincidences multiply. But nothing is random when the Spirit is leading. A friend once shared a story. He was on a 21-day fast for direction in his business. On day 18, he received a call out of nowhere. An investor he hadn't spoken to in 5 years offered to fund his next venture. No pitch, no chase, just a yes. Coincidence or angelic orchestration? You decide. Because fasting creates space for divine strategy, not just for your spiritual life, but for every area. income, relationships, creativity, decisions. When your body is silent, the heavens speak louder. But don't be naive. When angels move, they're not just delivering blessings. They're fighting battles you can't see. Daniel fasted for 21 days. The angel said, "I was sent the moment you prayed, but I was resisted." Daniel 10:12-13. There was warfare, conflict, resistance in the spirit realm. So what did Daniel do? He kept fasting. Because breakthrough doesn't always arrive instantly, but if you stop prematurely, you interrupt angelic assignments. Perseverance matters. Endurance is currency, and faith is the signal. So let me ask you, have you ever felt protected or guided during a fast in ways you couldn't explain? Averted danger, unexpected favor, timely provision. Share your moment in the comments. Because when angels move, the natural bends to the supernatural, and your life begins to align with purpose, prosperity, and spiritual authority like never before. The spirit that has always watched you, now in panic. There is a presence, ancient, familiar, quiet. It's followed you, not in the light, but in the shadows. It has studied your habits, whispered into your weaknesses, fed off your fear, off your doubt. But when you fast, it loses ground. Suddenly, the version of you it used to control begins to disappear. Your eyes change, your posture shifts, you speak with a new weight, and that spirit, the one that used to own your silence, starts to tremble, because you're not the same anymore. Make no mistake, this is not imagination, it's confrontation. There are spirits assigned to block your calling, your mental clarity, your productivity, your prosperity. But fasting drives them out, not with volume, but with alignment. And when they go, what they were blocking begins to flow. Purpose, peace, finances, healing, it's a shift, it's a turning. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1:5. Before we go on, write this in the comments. I will no longer be managed by a spirit I did not invite. If that resonates with your season, let it echo below. And if this message pierced you, if you felt the power of truth cutting through your spirit, leave a like. Not as a reaction, but as a declaration of alignment. It's a form of yes. And if you haven't subscribed yet, consider this your invitation. Not just to follow, but to walk with us as one who is growing, discerning, and rising in spiritual authority. The spiritual war you never saw, but always felt. You felt it, that weight in the air before a breakthrough. That tension when you decide to grow, to give, to fast. It's not coincidence, it's resistance. Because the moment you begin to rise, war breaks out. Not around you, within you. It's subtle, it's strategic, and it's spiritual. Though we walk in the flesh, we do not wage war according to the flesh. 2 Corinthians 10:3. Fasting doesn't create the war, it reveals it. And what you feel is the battle for your future intensifying. The enemy doesn't fight what isn't a threat. So when your fast begins, and the distractions come faster, when the temptations multiply, when you suddenly question your worth, that's not failure. That's confirmation. You've been targeted because you're shifting. Fasting is a weapon, and the moment you pick it up, the battlefield responds. Not every attack is punishment. Some are proof you're close to breakthrough. That's why clarity often follows chaos, because the war clears the path for the next level. A man once told me he began a fast to seek clarity on a career decision. Day 2, his car broke down. Day 3, he lost a client. By day 5, he almost gave up. But then, on day 6, he received the job offer that changed everything, a position he hadn't even applied for. Was that coincidence, or was that resistance before reward? Fasting will always test your endurance before it reveals the reward. The question is, will you endure long enough to see it? And who's fighting this war, really? It's not just about you. You're part of a bigger plan. Generational chains are being broken through your obedience. Family patterns are being disrupted. Strongholds are being dismantled. That's why the pressure feels bigger than your personal life. Because your fast isn't just about now, it's about legacy. You are right now participating in a spiritual battle that has been fought in silence for years. And now you're choosing to bring it into the light. Let me ask you, what did you feel the last time you fasted? What battles intensified? What patterns tried to pull you back? Don't dismiss it. Recognize it for what it is, spiritual war. But here's the truth. You don't fight for victory. You fight from victory. And that shift in posture changes everything. Because once you realize you've already been equipped, the battle becomes a declaration, not a defeat. The spiritual portals that open in the midst of surrender. There's a moment in fasting, not at the beginning, but somewhere in the depths, when the air changes. It's subtle but real. The veil grows thin. You don't just feel closer to God, you begin to access realms you didn't know were there. Portals open. Not fantasy, function. Fasting doesn't just quiet the noise. It tunes your spirit to divine frequency. And when that happens, heaven doesn't just visit, it responds, downloads, directions, visions, answers. All of it begins here. This is how the prophets saw. They didn't guess. They aligned. Fasting wasn't a ritual. It was an access point, a key. Daniel fasted and received visions of nations. John fasted and was shown the apocalypse. This wasn't imagination, it was spiritual positioning, and today it's the same. In the silence of surrender, portals to wisdom, purpose, and spiritual technology begin to open. Strategies for business, clarity for family, energy for transformation. Even the way you approach health, rest, money, all of it begins to shift. But there's a risk. Not every portal is divine. Fasting opens you, it sensitizes you, and that makes discernment non-negotiable. Because if your heart is divided, chasing platforms, ego, or spiritual performance, you might open something that looks like light, but leads to confusion. That's why surrender must be whole. True fasting isn't about manipulating God for results. It's about laying yourself down so that only what is divine can rise. That's the posture that unlocks true revelation and protects your path. I remember a woman who fasted for 14 days, asking for direction in her ministry. On the 9th day, she began receiving dreams, detailed, vivid, instructive. By day 12, she knew exactly what city to move to, who to partner with, and how to launch. This wasn't guesswork, it was guidance. That's what fasting offers, not hype, but holy strategy. Not wishful thinking, but spiritual design. It aligns your plans with divine blueprints. And when that alignment happens, acceleration follows. So here's what I'll ask you. Have you ever fasted and felt like something opened? A dream, a word, a deep knowing? What did it lead you to? Share it, because someone else may be standing in front of their own door, unsure if it's real. Your story might be the key that helps them step through. Remember, spiritual portals don't open to impress you, they open to assign you the words that gain supernatural power during a fast. Words always carry weight, but in a fast, they carry fire. The atmosphere changes. Your words, once just sound, now shape. They declare, they create, and they destroy. In the spiritual realm, fasting amplifies authority. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. Proverbs 18:21. But in a fast, the tongue doesn't just carry power, it becomes a weapon. Every declaration becomes an act of war. Every whisper of faith, a strategic strike against darkness. That's why what you say while fasting matters immensely. Casual complaints become traps. Fear-based speech opens doors. But when you align your words with God's word, the atmosphere responds. Fasting purifies the channel. It cleans the filter. It ensures what you speak comes from alignment, not emotion. You stop reacting and start declaring. And those declarations, they move things in the spirit, in your family, in your finances, in your body. Your voice becomes a vessel for divine will. There's a man I worked with. He fasted for clarity around his business and relationships. By day 7, he said he felt prompted to speak scripture out loud every morning. Within days, things began to shift. Arguments resolved, contracts finalized, ideas flowed. He didn't manipulate the outcome. He spoke what heaven had already willed. That's the power of alignment, and that alignment becomes acceleration, especially when your words are seasoned with prayer, rooted in faith, and released in love. But there's a warning. Words spoken in haste, in bitterness, in fear, they carry weight too, especially during a fast, because the veil is thin, the air is charged, and what you release has consequence. That's why discipline matters. Fasting isn't just about food, it's about stewardship, of time, of thought, of speech. Your voice during a fast is a spiritual tool, not to be wasted, not to be weaponized against yourself or others, but to be refined, directed, anointed. So let me ask you, during your fasts, what have you spoken into existence? What blessings have you unlocked? What battles have you accidentally empowered with your words? Think carefully. Share what you've learned, because someone right now is in the middle of a fast, and your wisdom may be the guardrail they need to speak with clarity, confidence, and supernatural authority. The spiritual level few reach, and almost no one sustains. There is a place in the spirit few ever reach. A level of clarity, presence, and divine alignment that makes you see everything differently. It's not hype. It's not emotionalism. It's what happens when you go beyond routine, beyond discipline, and into surrender. True fasting takes you there, not because it impresses God, but because it removes what's in the way. And when the barriers fall, presence fills the space. Tangible, unmistakable. The kind of presence that rewrites everything, but here's the truth. Most never stay there. They touch it, then retreat, because what is gained through fasting must be sustained through lifestyle. This isn't a mountaintop moment you visit once a year. It's an invitation to live different, to build systems around your spirit, to structure your life for divine flow. Without that structure, the fire fades, the clarity dims, the growth stalls. Spiritual elevation without stability leads to collapse. That's why maintenance is often harder than momentum. Think of Peter on the water. He stepped out by faith, walked, experienced what few ever would, but the moment he shifted focus, he sank. Matthew 14:29-30. This is the danger of shallow commitment after deep encounters. You touch the supernatural, then drift back into routine. Fasting demands follow-through. It invites a new standard, not perfection, alignment. And that alignment is what turns momentary breakthroughs into long-term transformation. In your calling, your income, your mind, your health, your legacy. I've seen it. People fast and soar. They receive ideas, healing, vision, but weeks later they forget. Why? Because they didn't anchor the experience with new habits. They didn't build altars. They just visited them, and altars aren't meant to be admired. They're meant to alter. Fasting is not the end. It's the reset, the ignition. What happens after it, how you live, decide, spend, grow, is what determines if you stay elevated or come crashing down. So I'll ask you plainly, have you ever touched that higher place and fallen back? What pulled you out? What could have kept you there? Share honestly, because the goal isn't to visit that place again. It's to learn how to live from it. Not perfectly, but intentionally. That's where your spiritual authority matures, and that's where heaven begins to partner with you, not just in moments, but in motion. The hidden code in biblical fasts that reveals an unseen purpose. Every number in Scripture carries meaning. Every fast in the Bible, 3 days, 7 days, 21, wasn't arbitrary. It was encoded. It was precise. Each one unlocked something specific in the spiritual realm. Fasting, when aligned with God's timing, becomes a key that turns dimensions. 3 days, death to life. 7, completion. 21, breakthrough. This isn't mysticism, it's divine mathematics. Patterns that reveal purpose. And when you fast within these divine rhythms, something hidden begins to move. Esther fasted for 3 days, and divine reversal followed. Esther 4:16. Elijah fasted for 40 and received direction in the wilderness. Daniel fasted for 21 and released angelic intervention. Each duration wasn't random. It reflected the weight of the assignment. That's why fasting must be spirit-led. Because it's not about duration, it's about alignment. Timing matters. When your fast is synced with God's whisper, acceleration follows. But when it's rooted in performance, the reward becomes distorted. I once met a man who fasted for 40 days out of pride. He wanted status, not surrender, and on day 20, his body broke. He was physically depleted and spiritually disoriented. Why? Because the fast wasn't born in the secret place. It was born on a stage. You see, the right fast, for the wrong reason, can open the wrong doors. That's why Jesus warned, "When you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do." Matthew 6:16. This is sacred, and sacred things must be handled with reverence. But when the fast is appointed, something awakens. Clarity sharpens. Revelation comes. The word becomes alive in ways you've never known. You begin to see patterns in your life, where you've been, what's been resisting you, and what God has been waiting to release. It's like stepping into a chamber where the blueprints of your destiny have been kept, sealed, until your spirit was ready to receive them. That's the power of a fast aligned with purpose. It doesn't just change your circumstances, it recalibrates your direction. Let me ask you, have you ever fasted by the calendar, but not by conviction? Have you chosen a number or been called into one? What did it reveal? What did it unlock? Share your experience. Because understanding the why behind the when could be the very thing someone needs to hear before they begin their next fast. Remember, timing isn't everything, but in the kingdom, it changes everything. The visions granted only to those who endure the fire of fasting. Not every vision is freely given. Some are hidden, reserved, protected, like treasure buried deep beneath the surface of the soul. And fasting is the fire that refines your spirit to receive them. It strips away noise, doubt, fear, until only faith remains. And it's in that purified space that vision comes. Not daydreams, not ambition, but divine downloads. Revelation so precise, it alters the course of your life. Because fasting doesn't just empty you, it prepares you to see. Think of Paul, blinded on the road to Damascus. But it wasn't until he fasted 3 days, no food, no sight, that clarity came. Acts 9:9-12. Then Ananias arrived. Then scales fell. Then vision followed. You see, God didn't just want to stop him. He wanted to show him. But vision requires readiness, and readiness requires fire. Fasting is that fire. It breaks the flesh. It awakens the spirit. And in that awakening, God shows you what others can't see, what you weren't ready to see until now. But let's be honest, visions can be terrifying. Not because of what they show, but because of what they ask. They call you higher. They demand obedience. They break comfort. That's why many receive glimpses, but few receive clarity, because clarity comes with responsibility, and responsibility requires maturity. The fire of fasting doesn't just qualify you to see, it stabilizes you to carry. Without that process, vision can become a burden instead of a blessing. That's why some revelations feel heavy. They're meant to be stewarded. I once knew a woman who fasted for breakthrough in her family. But what she saw instead was a vision of herself, leading, teaching, breaking generational curses through her voice. She didn't feel ready. But God wasn't showing her the now. He was showing her the next. That's what true vision does. It reveals what's already planted, waiting for permission to grow. And fasting gives you that permission. It aligns your internal world so the external call can be fulfilled without sabotage. So tell me, have you ever seen something while fasting that didn't make sense at first? Something that scared you or stretched you? Drop your story in the comments, because the fire isn't punishment, it's preparation. And what you see on the other side of it might just be the very reason you were called to fast in the first place. The door that only opens for those who endure to the end. Every fast has a door, a moment. A vinyl threshold where natural meets supernatural and something shifts forever. But here's the catch. Most never reach it. They stop at discomfort. They bow to distraction. They confuse delay with denial. But those who endure, truly endure, reach a sacred place. A place where the spiritual becomes tangible. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. Matthew 24:13. That's not just eternal salvation. That's breakthrough. That's transformation. And it's reserved for the finishers. You see, the final days of a fast are different. There's pressure, yes, but also precision. You're lighter in the body, sharper in the spirit. Heaven is closer, your hearing is clearer, and the enemy, he's louder. Because the closer you get to that door, the more hell wants to keep it shut. But here's the truth, the door isn't opened by force. It's opened by faith. It's not about strength, it's about surrender. And the last stretch of your fast is where surrender becomes complete. A woman once told me she almost quit her fast on day 19 of a 21-day stretch. Her body was tired, her emotions were raw. But on that final night, in the quiet of prayer, she felt something lift, a heaviness gone, a clarity she hadn't known before. 2 days later, the contract she'd been waiting on for 6 months was signed. Was it magic? No. It was spiritual law. She stayed until the door opened. And the door did what it always does for the faithful. It made a way. The question is, what's waiting behind your door? Direction, healing, financial strategy, emotional closure, a clean break from the addiction that's followed you for years. You won't know until you stay, until you press. Because that final stretch, it's not resistance, it's refinement. It's the moment where your will breaks just enough for God's will to fully take over. And once that door opens, what you find isn't just an answer, it's a new identity, a spiritual elevation you can't lose. Have you ever fasted and sensed that moment, the threshold, the brink? Did you step through or step back? Let's talk about it, because someone right now is right there, 1 day away from breakthrough and wondering if they should quit. Don't walk away. The door is closer than it feels, and on the other side, life redefined. The spiritual truth that was always hidden, and fasting reveals without mercy. Fasting doesn't just open doors, it opens eyes. It doesn't politely reveal. It exposes. It confronts. It takes everything you've built around your comfort and says, now let's see what's real. That's why fasting is feared, not because it's hard, but because it's honest. It doesn't ask permission to show you what's broken. It doesn't filter, it doesn't flatter, it reflects. And what it reveals isn't just external resistance, It's internal rebellion, thoughts, patterns, addictions, agreements you didn't even know you made. It's like peeling back layers on a soul that's been surviving instead of living. Suddenly, you see the roots of your delay, the cracks in your foundation, the subtle lies you believed that shaped your identity. And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 8:32. But freedom starts with exposure, and exposure is painful until you realize it's also mercy, because what God reveals, He intends to heal. He doesn't show you your chains to shame you. He shows them so you'll stop living as if they were unbreakable. I once guided a man through a fast. On day 5, he texted me, "I don't think I know who I am." I said, "Good. That means the false self is losing control." That's the rawness fasting brings. It doesn't introduce you to a new version of you. It reintroduces you to the one God originally designed, before fear, before failure, before survival kicked in. But that version can only emerge when the noise is silenced and the flesh is submitted. That's why it's not just revelation, it's resurrection. But this unveiling also shows you the opposition, the forces that stood behind your confusion, the unseen patterns that turn spiritual warfare into normal life. And when you see it, you can no longer tolerate what you used to excuse. Fasting doesn't just clean your spirit, it clarifies your standards. You think differently about relationships, money, time, health, decisions. You begin to live by design, not by default, because once the truth has shown its face, the lie can no longer wear yours. So let me ask you, what truth did your fast reveal that you were afraid to face? Did it hurt or did it heal? Leave a comment, because someone's afraid of what the light might show. But here's the final truth. The enemy doesn't fight your fast because of what it takes from you. He fights it because of what it reveals to you, and once you see clearly, you're unstoppable. You've seen what fasting really is now. Not a diet, not a ritual, not just a pause from food. It's war, it's alignment, it's transformation. It's a spiritual transaction with eternal consequences. When you fast, you don't just move heaven, you threaten hell. And everything around you begins to shift, either to resist what's coming or to prepare you to receive it. You become spiritually dangerous. You become divinely useful. That's why so few talk about it, and why the enemy works overtime to keep you from finishing. This isn't about hype. This is about clarity, about finally understanding why your prayers seemed delayed, why your purpose felt stuck, why breakthrough was so close and yet so silent. Fasting unlocks it. It reveals what's been hidden, heals what's been buried, and activates what's been waiting. But it requires you to keep going, to press in, to stay aligned even after the fast ends, because fasting is a beginning, not a destination. So let me leave you with this. If this message stirred something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video as a personal declaration, not to boost numbers, but to seal your agreement with truth. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel, not just to consume, but to walk in alignment with a community that is pursuing deeper clarity, stronger faith, and true transformation. Now, if this woke something up in you, you're ready for the next step. In the next video, we're going deeper into the patterns, the hidden laws, and the spiritual economy behind everything you think is natural. If this one opened your eyes, the next one will unlock the door. Don't miss it. Don't.